Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's learn. That's what we usually do here. My name's Connor if you're new. Original link from real life lore, top of the description. Preemptive like. Why all Europe? Oh yeah, this is a much longer compilation of different European territorial disputes. This one is on Gibraltar. Let's learn.
But Spain's continued control over Olivenza for centuries, despite signing treaties to give it back, will seem fairly hypocritical when it comes to Spain's other territorial dispute in Europe over Gibraltar, which takes us into the more moderate levels of territorial disputes in Europe that—
Wait, what? Is there context that I need to...
And it's been a fairly moot point anyway, since Spain and Portugal have each been in the EU for decades now, so it's not really a very serious issue. But Spain's continued control over Olivenza for centuries, despite signing treaties to give it back, will seem fairly hypocritical when it comes to Spain's other territorial dispute in Europe over Gibraltar, which takes us into the more moderate levels of territorial disputes in Europe that actually involve larger numbers of people or more serious national strategic interests.
How did this form? This seems like such a strange rock formation, like pushed up. Maybe it was much larger and it just caved into the ocean over hundreds of thousands of years.
Gibraltar is a British overseas territory and city at the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula that, while small, is very densely populated with around 34,000 people today who are all British citizens. Gibraltar was first captured by the British from Spain more than 3 centuries ago, back in 1704 during the War of the Spanish Succession, which led Spain to agree on ceding Gibraltar to the UK under the terms of the 1713 Treaty of Utrecht that ended that war. Spain then attempted to recapture Gibraltar by force with a siege in 1727, and another very long siege between 1779 and 1783 during the American Revolutionary War, neither of which were successful and which
Britain was dealing with so many things during the Revolutionary War that shows that they weren't trying their hardest to keep America. Kind of
resulted in 1883 during the American Revolutionary War, neither of which were successful and which resulted in subsequent treaties in 1729 and 1783 that all reaffirmed Britain's continued sovereignty over Gibraltar. The issue then remained fairly dormant for nearly another 2 centuries until Spain's dictator Francisco Franco reopened Spain's territorial claims to Gibraltar again in the 1960s, which have generally continued through to the present day. In theory, the Spanish government has sought to return the whole of Gibraltar back to their country through diplomacy since the Franco era of the 60s, but Spain hasn't ever claimed the entirety of Gibraltar's territory throughout this process. Instead, Spain has based its current territorial claims to Gibraltar on the exact language used within the original 1713 Treaty of Utrecht that ceded the territory over to Britain, which they argue covered only the fortified perimeter of the town of Gibraltar as it existed back at that time, which followed this line immediately to the north of the geographic Rock of Gibraltar. Spain argues that none of the territory to the north of this line was ever agreed to be ceded over to Britain by the Treaty of Utrecht, and argues that over the centuries since then, the British gradually expanded their area of control in Gibraltar north across the isthmus
so that they can get an airport
that connects Gibraltar to the Spanish mainland that form the current de facto border. This has led to a situation where Spain today, as of 2024, formally claims this amount of territory in northern Gibraltar between where the current border is and the boundary Spain claims existed back in 1713.
Oh, so okay, so Spain claims existed back in the Treaty of Utrecht, or like how is this they claim it? Was it or wasn't it? And maybe the British took this area because it was the only place that they could put a large runway. Maybe. So maybe that has some logic to it.
Which notably includes the entire Gibraltar airport and the residences of around 4,200 people who live within Gibraltar's northern district, a claim that Britain rejects on the grounds that, basically, they've continually controlled this land for centuries now, so it may as well stay British today.
Interesting.
Which is also basically the same argument that Spain uses for its continued control of Olivenza. Moreover, Spain also insists that Britain's ownership over the rest of Gibraltar does not confer with it any usual territorial waters that would be granted under international law. Spain insists that Britain's only territorial waters around Gibraltar are extremely limited to being immediately within the port of Gibraltar and no further, while the UK insists on their usual territorial waters around Gibraltar that would be granted under international maritime law, which leads to all of these waters around Gibraltar being disputed between the UK and Spain as well. And with both of these territorial and maritime disputes around Gibraltar remaining active, Spain has spent decades attempting to negotiate with the UK on getting back the rest of Gibraltar as well. Spain's argument has been historically based on 2 points: that Britain's control of Gibraltar violates Spain's territorial integrity, and that Gibraltar's population of British citizens today are settlers and a product of British colonialism, which is why Spain refuses to consider the interests or opinions of any of Gibraltar's residents today. And
Okay. I mean, like he said, that was making him hypocritical by still controlling that part of land that is disputed with Portugal. Countries, you're going to. So I see the point, right? In saying like, oh, if the border was here, just because you've been settling it for a while doesn't mean you should exactly get it. But then I also understand on the other side that countries are going to be hypocritical and claim one thing to be abided by, and then ignore something that they do. So I'm not here to pass any full, like, this is what should happen, but just what I'm kind of noticing so far.
Insists on negotiating the status of the territory exclusively with the UK government itself. Britain's perspective, meanwhile, is based on the principle of self-determination for the 32,000 residents of Gibraltar today, who time and time again have shown in referendums and votes that they overwhelmingly prefer to remain a part of the UK. And the British government refuses to negotiate with Spain on the issue without the inclusion and representation of the Gibraltar government as an equal party, and Britain has consistently rejected all of Spain's various attempts to negotiate on Gibraltar's status for decades now. The dispute has also gotten even more controversial since 2020, when the UK left the European Union, which took Gibraltar along with it, which established a more firm land border crossing between the EU and the UK, all of which elevates the Gibraltar dispute to something a bit more moderate in intensity.
It is pretty fantastic positioning at the Strait of Gibraltar at the mouth of the Mediterranean, so I can see the strategic importance, along with the fact that the locals identify as British and want to stay within Britain. But again, like something you have to be like, imagine Spain took like the tip of what is that? This far southwest part of England. What's it called? I'm blanking. The peninsula near like Devon and Bristol. I'm blanking on the name. But like, imagine Spain getting that 300 years ago and holding on to it. If you were Britain, you would be a little bit angry about them having that, despite the logic around how they got it. And Spain is going to be the same with here. And so people are going to fight for their own best interests. You got to... But again, this is the thing about having a population that identifies with you in a certain area. It's really hard to claim something, because then you're going to have to subjugate the people that are there. But yet, most countries wouldn't want that there. It's a hairy situation.
Next up, we're going back to Croatia again, because oh man.
Very interesting. Would appreciate any comments down below, guys. I know very little about this, but I can see it's... I guess there are some arguments on both sides. Again, when you have a population that is on your side, it's really hard for the other side to claim much in getting it back. You know, awesome video. Love y'all. Would appreciate any comments. See you guys next time. Bye.